just going back at those statements that mmlearn has heard from, or questions that they've heard from contributors, if we just look at these, embedded in several of these is the issue of capacity, but it wasn't dealt with up front. In fact, the cart was before the horse. If we consider, I'm overwhelmed, my sister won't help me, is there anything I can do? Why isn't mom or dad doing it themselves? Why are not they responsible to do it? Well, the answer is they're not mentally capacitated. But did we ever really formally determine that? One that's down here a little ways, I think my brother is stealing, hurting, verbally abusing my mom. I've had a number of Adult Protective Services cases where I've been asked to consult, and where the issue was that the elderly person was giving a whole bunch of their money to just one of their kids who still lived at the home. The other kids are worried that the mother's wealth is going away, they're not going to get an inheritance, or they're appropriately worried that mom's going to give it all away to this ne'er-do-well daughter that's living with her, and she's not going to have enough to take care of herself for the rest of her life. Well, the issue is she mentally capacitated to do that? Because if she is mentally capacitated, then she is able to make mistakes. Capacitated people are allowed to make mistakes. Capacitated people are allowed to use bad judgment. Some people exercise that right throughout their entire life. But, and it isn't the government's or some other family members or a doctor's right to step in and to force a better decision. A good decision is what that person wanted. It's a free country. But if the person is not mentally capacitated, this becomes elder abuse and is at least a misdemeanor, if not a felony, if it is actually physical abuse. Common issues regarding the unequal yoke, the family that isn't pulling together to solve the needs of a dependent elderly parent. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I just can't bear to see mom and dad that way. These are reverberating comments that we've heard over and over again. Let's take them one at a time. The time issue, they say they don't have the time. Does that mean that you do? Caregiving oftentimes requires a major sacrifice in time, and therefore, for the primary caregiver, it could cause a sacrifice of job. I just learned today from Maria that there's a whole industry out there in business looking at the decreased productivity of the worker who has aging parents. Other family obligations may be set to the back burner so that mom doesn't get to go to Johnny's ball games, dad doesn't get to go to the daughter's dance recitals because of the demands of caregiving. And obviously what the deal is here is that you have to make the time for this, or you're going to need to ante up for professional help. That's oftentimes what the nursing home or assisted living is all about, is the family that just can't do it because their own lives require too much, and so they have to go a professional route. Another of the common issues is money. They don't have the money, but you do. You're rolling in dough. With clarity and with documentation, you need to understand that to the extent that your ward, your aging family member, your aging parent has finances, those are to be used up first. They should be spent down before you would ever dip into your own pocket. And if you did, it's not a legal obligation to do so. It would be out of your own goodwill. If and when the elder's money is gone, you don't have that legal obligation. That's not a principle of a law in the United States. And the debts of the parents are not your debts. So you would go to Medicaid for medical stuff. You would go to other programs for other stuff. Adult children are not responsible. And as a matter of fact, if we look at society's needs, the caregiving itself is a Herculean contribution on your part to the well-being of society, and should be plenty for any of us to expect of you. common issue, aversion to mom or dad's declining condition. They can't bear to see it, but you enjoy that? I don't think so. Particularly the intimate things, bathroom, bathing, pericare for an aging parent. It's a taboo. We don't look at each other's private parts in families. That's just not done. And so this role reversal is a major step in the dynamics of a family. Feeding, dressing, medications are also burdensome, but not so much as some of those intimate caregiving chores. Coping with behavioral outbursts of a demented patient, now that does fall into the same kind of emotionally taxing task that does the pericare and that. I would need to make you aware that depression is common in caregivers. It's also common in dementia patients as a consequence of their disease process. And no matter where it originates, if it originates in the caregiver, there's about a 75–80% coexistence of depression in their ward and vice versa. So depression is highly contagious in this situation of ward and informal caregiver. If we recognize that, we can nip it in the bud, and we get a lot more success. One of the keys here to solving this problem is requesting help. You need to ask directly, firmly, honestly of your siblings for their participation in handling this problem. You need to make that request as a demand. It's not contingent. It's not a question. It's a demand. And it needs to have an action that you're telling them that you need them to do, and consequences if they choose not to participate. This is my Dr. Phil moment here. You don't ask directly, you forfeit your right to gripe for all of eternity. So this is a key thing. Remedies for that unequal yoke. There are other ways to do your fair share without money or investment, and maybe without doing the direct caregiving, particularly if the logistics of space and time aren't. If a family member lives in a distant place, they're not going to be able to do what the daughter who lives in the same town as mom. In our own family, my wife's mother is in her 90s, is in assisted living up in Omaha, Nebraska. Her younger daughter lives there yet. They're in the healthcare field too. She's a nurse, so she's got both the skills and the geography to be the major player in helping mom with her needs as she becomes physically and to some extent, fortunately a very mild extent, cognitively impaired. And we've talked about this, and actually being the distant people, we initiated that conversation saying, just because of where we live, we're way down here in Texas, what you need to do is call us when there's something really big, and we'll try to come up and we'll do a greater share of it at those times, or we're going to try to pay you back in other ways. Some of the other ways you can do is share the caregiving might be the bookwork, running errands, doing the yard work, if you were in the same town, doing something that the sibling needs done to offset what they're doing for mom. And that has been one of the tactics that we have used with my wife's sister and her husband, is to say, let us do some things for you. Remedies for the unequal yoke need to consider what the siblings, family members' skills are. We are a healthcare family, so that's a no-brainer, but there might be other situations in where one family member was a healthcare provider, others know nothing about that. So clearly, more of certain tasks are going to fall on that person who already has those skills. And if that means that the caregiving, the donation of time and effort, is unequal between the two siblings, then you need to plan for that and figure out ways to get around it to re-equalize it to the extent that's possible. Don't shoot for perfect equality, however. That's just not achievable in most cases. But when it is unequal, agree upon that inequality and reward it fairly for the person that's putting in the extra effort. Decide on this well before this becomes a way of life. If you let this get down the road a piece, and it's it's the way things have been going for the last 4 months, 6 months, a year, the chances that you're going to get an uninvolved sibling to all of a sudden change their ways and pitch in and do their fair share is fairly limited. They've got you over a barrel. So the time to do this is way up front when the problem first presents itself, and we've got to sit down and we've got to decide how we are going to handle this family problem, this joint problem. Review the understanding from time to time when you have family get-togethers and so forth. And let me say that it actually is best to put this on paper with signatures. Do it as an informal contract so that there's a clear understanding that good fences make good neighbors. Remedies for the unequal yoke: cowboy up, as we say in Texas, and tell others to do it too. This is what life has dealt us. These are the cards we've got. We've got to play these cards. We don't get to reshuffle the deck and play a different hand. Consider equalizing the unequal effort by the sibling family member does something else for the caregivers. I've told you that. But it might also be true that the uninvolved family member in a distant place might actually pay if the daughter that lives in town has to let go of her job and do this, then why can't the other sibling actually pay them a salary for doing that? And if they don't have the money, but if mom and dad do have money and there's going to be an inheritance, make a contract for an unequal distribution of the inheritance. So often I see parents who have divided their inheritance equally among siblings and don't recognize that one individual or another is doing a greater share. Up in Nebraska and South Dakota, we would see this with the oldest boy who stays on the farm and continues to run the farm with dad. And as dad starts to lose it, isn't physically capable, the son takes over the entire ranch or farming operation. They live in in the original house, and dad and mom have built a nice new house. And the son, who has foregone college and run the farm or run the ranch with dad, now gets an equal share of the farm when dad and mom die. And the kids that live in New York don't want to keep the farm. They want to sell it. Now this 50-year-old man who knows nothing else but this farm and has put his entire life in it only owns a fifth of the farm, and the money is divided equally between the kids. Not good. Time to get that stuff straightened out is way ahead of time, and contracting for the inheritance is one way that can be done. When irreconcilable differences occur, and these are serious differences, then arbitrate. You might call in your clergyman, you might call in your doctor. If the elder is in a nursing home, the social worker at the nursing home is very equipped to be an arbitrator of these kind of family differences. If all else fails, you may have to get a lawyer. If the other sibling is neglectful or is abusing financially or physically the aging parent, then that's time for adult protective services. Seeking guardianship as a last resort. If you need to give the rest of your family a divorce and take over and do what's right, you may need to go to court. If you do go to court and get a guardianship, be prepared. You'll have to do annual reports, but this protects you later on from insinuations from your other family members. Not responsible personally for the ward's expenses, and as a matter of fact, with the court oversight, you can actually pay yourself for the expenses of being a guardian, trips to Austin, doing this, doing that. You can pay yourself from your loved one's estate.